What's up guys, my name is Ace, and it looks like we may have a fairly serious issue here with Black Ops 7 that's similar to an apparent bug that we saw that I covered back in early December. You guys might have remembered this was starting to blow up in the community. People were claiming that you could have increased damage in multiplayer by simply booting up Warzone first and then going into Call of Duty multiplayer, and then they were noticing in the firing range, you would deal the Warzone levels of damage rather than the multiplayer levels of damage. And in many cases, you're dealing more damage per bullet in Warzone compared to Black Ops 7 with the same gun. And that was obviously very concerning when you could hop in and kill a firing range dummy in like 2 hits with an SMG, for instance, that's designed to take 4 hits. But with that, if you guys remember, I did the testing on that and discovered that that only applied to the firing range. As soon as you actually got into a real match, you were dealing the appropriate amount of damage, and therefore you weren't actually gaining any advantage there, thankfully, because that would have been completely game-breaking. But also alongside that, you may have noticed as well back in the day that if you did that, you booted up Warzone first and then you backed out of Warzone, went to multiplayer, oftentimes your attachments would be all messed up. It would be displaying the Warzone stats for your attachments rather than the multiplayer stats. And in some cases, the same attachment will do totally different things in Warzone versus multiplayer. And your advanced stats would also be showing totally different values for multiplayer compared to Warzone. Now, it turns out just recently, I don't know if this was reintroduced with Season 2 or what, it appears this bug is back, but it may be even worse this time around as well. And I want to give a big thanks to Insured Frames on Twitch. He came to me with this and convinced me to test this again on multiplayer. I was skeptical. I thought it was just the same bug. But the thing he got me to test was Recoil using the full auto mod on the M8A1, just as one example here. And it turns out this bug is not only back, but it's actually having an impact on the game, in some ways at least. Stick with me here and I'll explain exactly what's going on here. When I just booted up multiplayer without touching Warzone at all, using my full auto M8 setup, I did a recoil test here at 13 meters on this wall, and everything looks normal. This is the recoil pattern I would expect to see when playing multiplayer. But then I closed my game down, booted up Warzone first, then hopped into multiplayer, and I did the exact same test at the same range with the same gun in a public match. I wanted to make sure I was doing all of these tests in an actual public match. Nothing changed here setup-wise, and yet very clearly I'm experiencing way less recoil by booting Warzone up before multiplayer. So you're actually gaining an advantage here and getting the Warzone stats, at least recoil-wise, for this particular mod. And it's also worth noting when checking the advanced stats, there are some very clear discrepancies here. Again, with the exact same attachment setup. I've changed nothing with the setup, but on the left, you can see my advanced stats with that setup when I don't boot up Warzone first versus the right when I did boot up Warzone and then I hopped into multiplayer after that. And let's take a look at some of the key differences here. As we saw, the recoil is very different, and if we compare the recoil values, they're clearly different here as well. I also noticed our rate of fire value was different. On the left, working as intended when you just boot up multiplayer without touching Warzone, we're getting 1,000 rounds per minute with this setup, whereas on the right, if I boot Warzone first and then go into multiplayer, we're seeing a slightly reduced rate of fire at 984 rounds per minute. With this one, I went back and I looked at those same recoil plot tests and I calculated the rate of fire in each of those tests, and it turned out we're seeing the standard multiplayer rate of fire here in both cases at 1,000 rounds per minute. So that was not applying to regular public matches, unlike the recoil changes. And then the thing that's most concerning here is the damage discrepancy. As you can see on the left, this setup is designed to be a 6 to 9 shot kill in multiplayer, depending on your range, whereas on the right, it appears it's now just going to be a 4 to 5 shot kill. So let's have a look at that in the hijack match. This is where I forced this bug to take place and I was seeing reduced recoil. Was I also seeing increased damage? Thankfully, no. Once again, damage is unchanged with this bug. I'm still killing people in 6 shots up close, as intended for multiplayer with this setup, rather than 4 shots, which is what we'd be seeing with the Warzone stats. So rate of fire and damage are not affected by this. However, another thing that I noticed that is different is the reload timings, or at least the apparent reload timings. When not bugged out, you can see when I reload, everything looks normal. The moment I insert the magazine, you can see the ammo appears on the bottom right. That's working as expected. Whereas in the game where I triggered this bug, as you can see here, it's no longer aligning with the animation. I've got the magazine in, and yet I still don't have the ammo in my magazine at this point. I have to wait just that little bit longer, and it's long enough that it'll really throw you off, and it feels quite bugged. It feels like you're just stuck there, unable to use your gun, even though it looks like your gun should be ready to go. And this is a bug that I saw a lot of people reporting. I believe it was with the launch of Season 2. And I think this fully explains it. It's this Warzone bug. If you boot Warzone up first, it's going to mess with some things in-game. And of course, I wanted to see, is this actually putting you at a realistic disadvantage here? Not just visually, but is this actually increasing your reload time? So I put them side by side, and it's actually pretty interesting here that the animation is faster when you're experiencing this Warzone bug, but the actual reload time, the amount of time it takes to add the ammo into your gun, is working as expected for multiplayer. So you're not actually reloading slower in this case. It's just that when experiencing this bug, your reload animation is faster, which causes visual issues because it looks like you should be reloaded when you technically aren't yet. So clearly this is causing some issues, and if you have noticed some weird things like this going on, some weird timings, also I've noticed some reload sound bugs as well. It appears this can be triggered by booting up Warzone and then hopping into multiplayer. And if you are experiencing this, it's easy to reset. All you have to do is close your game down, reboot it, and just go straight into multiplayer. Don't open Warzone first. And that should fix the issue for you. Also, if you are somebody that plays both Warzone and multiplayer, anytime you're done playing Warzone, make sure you restart your app before hopping into multiplayer so you don't run into this bug. Now, on the flip side of that, I suspect people are going to start taking advantage of this and potentially exploiting this bug. Thankfully, it can't be exploited so heavily that it becomes completely game-breaking because the damage remains consistent for what we expect in multiplayer. That would be game-breaking, and I wouldn't be making this video if that were the case. I'd be immediately just going to the devs behind the scenes. But in this case, it looks like it's just Recoil that can be exploited with this. And while I'm not familiar at all with how they handle the stats on the Warzone side of things, I suspect this may also go in the other direction, where it may actually be harming you if you're experiencing this bug rather than helping you in the recoil department, for instance. And then also, even if it is helping with your recoil, is that really worth it for experiencing this really annoying reload animation mismatch? For me, absolutely not. I won't be taking advantage of this bug or trying to take advantage of it in any way. I just wanted to show it off for you guys to show exactly what's happening here and to help you guys understand if you are experiencing strange issues like the reload bug, for instance. All you've got to do is restart your app and don't touch Warzone. And just my final thoughts on this, it's just frustrating to see stuff like this happen. I really wish Warzone were like entirely disconnected so stuff like this would never be happening. And at the very least, I'm hoping this is something that's fairly easy for them to get on top of. But time will have to tell on that. And there we have it. That is going to wrap it up today's video, and I am curious to hear what you guys think about this bug in those comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.